Good evening. My name is Maryanna Deangelis. This is my video for our first video presentation for Intro to Macroeconomics, Eco 112. So in class, we went over how one person's spending is another person's income. That basically refers to how money flows through the economy. So in my first slide, I went over the two-factor circular flow model, and that shows basically how personal income, which is wages and dividends, comes from businesses to households, and then how those same wages and dividends are used as expenditures back to businesses. It could also go the opposite way, how it says factor for production labor. So people of households give businesses their labor, and then businesses provide goods and services for those same people of those households. And then on my next slide, I created my own personal circular flow model. I am currently a server and a bartender while I attend the College of Staten Island. So I started it off with a bar guest or a patron using their paycheck to purchase goods at my restaurant. So a bar guest, bar patron comes in, uses their paycheck, spends their money on beers, wine, food, what have you. That person generally also would leave a tip for my services, which is tending to them for the night. So their income then becomes my income, which is very literal of a sense, specifically because hospitality ends up dealing with tips and things of that nature. So it could apply to obviously so much more, but basically it starts out there. So one person's income, they come in, their income becomes my income. So now that income is in my hands. I use that same income on my bills. I have many, obviously, as we all do. And I take that income that I have now received, use in my example, I use it for rent. So starts at the bar patron, comes to me. I use it to pay my rent to my landlord. And then the property management, landlord, what have you, depending on your situation, would use my income to pay their mortgage. So started off in the hands of my bar patron, came to me, I used it to pay my landlord uses it to pay the bank, and it goes right back around because banks end up also investing in businesses of people. So maybe that original bar patron is a small business owner. That bank could invest that same money back into that small business, or even into another business that employs that employee. And it could continue on and on. So even though I just directly did a circular flow model for my example, it could continue on and on to branch out into other things, because beyond that bar patron leaving me a tip for that night, that check also would go towards the business that employs me. So not only would I receive some money, it would pay other employees, such as salaried managers or hourly line cooks, hostesses, or it could pay for the overhead of the building. So it could, again, be paying rent towards the building. It could also be paying for products purchased. So it would go to the restaurant, it would go to me and to the restaurant owner. The restaurant owner would use it for, meat, produce, anything. And not only would it flow circularly, but it would also sort of branch out in that sense. Opportunity cost, I wrote that it is the value of an alternative that is sacrificed when a choice is made. So it's the value of something that you're giving up when making a decision, basically. So it could refer to time, it could refer to energy, it could refer finitely to money, it could refer to a lot of things. So then again, for my personal example, just super easy for me to use bartending as an example because I do it every day. So for my example, I put working versus attending school. You know, for me, for a very long time, it was very hard. I was making a lot of money. So when I was younger, I didn't necessarily see school as an opportunity cost. Basically, I just saw the money that was coming in. I thought, hey, you know, I could make a lot of money doing this. But I also, when I was younger, didn't factor in things like I would be on my feet for so long, my body would start to deteriorate. That's a little bit dramatic, but you know, my feet hurt, my back hurt. Mentally, I'm exhausted from speaking to people for 8 to 10 hours a day, as opposed to if I would have gone to school a little bit younger and been in maybe sort of a less stressful job for the same amount of money. So while bartending at the time was a great opportunity for me, I didn't have to go to school to become a bartender and earn a livable wage. Basically, I gave up sort of the stability and what's the word I'm looking for? The cushiness, for lack of a better word, of, you know, maybe being an accountant in a firm, just doing my little numbers. Also, it could it could also be used as an example for, you know, specifically picking up a shift. So the opportunity cost of picking up a shift versus the opportunity cost of coming to class. So I could, you know, someone could be sick, I could be offered their shift, I could work that shift and possibly make $200 to $400 depending on how busy of a night it is. And I could also miss class, I could not attend class, and I could find out that there was a pop quiz that day, and my grade could suffer for that very same reason. So it is the opportunity cost of making money, like $200 to $400, or risking the chance of not understanding the material, missing a quiz, missing the review, to then affect the grade. Incentives. For that slide, I wrote, incentives are factors that provide motivation for consumers to behave in a certain manner. So that's pretty much the important part. Incentives are important because they shape the overall behavior of consumers and thus the outcome of the economy. So the big point or understanding of incentives is that an incentive is something that makes a consumer behave a certain way. So for my examples, I talked about the COVID-19 pandemic, how stimulus checks were given out and expanded unemployment benefits were given. Then the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program, was an incentive for business owners to keep employees employed, keep them on payroll, and not have them using the expanded unemployment benefits. So in my personal experience, I was a bartender. I was laid off temporarily during the COVID-19 pandemic, and my boyfriend was not. My boyfriend worked in a different restaurant. He worked at Babaku's, if there's something similar, basically. So sort of like a Chipotle. So they necessarily didn't have to lay off their employees because those business models did better with only to-go service. So for restaurants, they needed much fewer employees, going from a full service restaurant down to only to-goes. They only needed a small handful of employees. So for the economy, basically those stimulus checks and expanded unemployment benefits, they promoted the economy to continue moving, because for a lot of people it was a very uncertain time. People didn't know what was going on. A lot of people were recently laid off or let go of, depending on your situation. So for a lot of people, I'm sure many would have scrimped and saved whatever they could have, because originally, without those expanded unemployment benefits, I was only supposed to be getting $280 a week from unemployment, which certainly wasn't even enough to cover my rent, let alone anything extra, let alone groceries, let alone utilities, and absolutely definitely not going out. That was out of the question. So with those expanded unemployment benefits and those stimulus checks, it allowed for, people to buy the things they needed and keep the economy going and moving, much like that circular flow model that we talked about. Without that, everything would have just been at a standstill. People would have just, been squatting in their apartments and not paying rent, not paying anything. But, those were examples of incentives that our government provided during a global pandemic. They are things that motivated us to spend and affected the outcome of the economy. That's the end.